Should we now feel differently about how the Kings season came to an end? We'll discuss that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Coming up today's show, we're going to focus on Kings players from last season that will be key players this coming season, like Quinton Byfield, and a Kings key prospect for the upcoming season, Brant Clark. But we start with the Edmonton Oilers. And no, you have not accidentally tuned into Locked On Oilers. This is, in fact, Locked On LA Kings. And I know there are some people that listen to the show that, well, they probably aren't listening or watching right now because they're just interested in the Kings while the season goes on, which is fine. We also have an audience that maybe only cares about the LA Kings, not really interested in what goes on outside of the Kings realm necessarily. And then there are the others, probably you, an everydayer who's a hardcore hockey fan who wants to know everything about the Kings, of course, but also is interested in what's going on around the NHL as well. And I know we even have a few listeners of this show that have also started to listen to my weekly NHL show, the Puck Podcast, which is very cool to have some of the fans of this show listen to that show as well. So you probably know, but the Edmonton Oilers last night did in fact advance to the Stanley Cup Final. They upset the Dallas Stars, who I picked at the end of the regular season to be the eventual Stanley Cup winner. I got that one wrong. My picks are so-so. The Oilers beat the Stars in Game 6 last night to win the series in 6 games. So it is, in fact, the Edmonton Oilers facing the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final. Go Panthers. The Oilers obviously have eliminated our Kings the last 3 postseasons. They did it this year in 5 games, and they are now on to the final. So I ask this question. Does what the Oilers have done so far this postseason change your view in any way when it comes to how the LA Kings season came to an end? Do you feel better that the season came to an end at the hands of a team that's made it to the Stanley Cup Final, or does it change nothing? If the Oilers end up winning it all, does that change your mind at all, or not at all? I've been wondering about this myself, and so let's discuss it a little bit. Maybe some reasons why the Oilers making it to the Stanley Cup Final should change your mind about how the Kings season came to an end. I think we can all agree the Kings did lose to a better team. The Oilers had more points than the Kings during the regular season. They had a better finish in the standings. They were second. The Kings were third in the Pacific. The Oilers won the head-to-head matchup against the LA Kings. But maybe the Kings didn't just lose to a better team. Maybe they lost to the best team in the entire NHL. Now, the Oilers obviously didn't have the best record at the end of the regular season. As I just mentioned, they finished second in the division to the Vancouver Canucks. However, after a slow start, they made a coaching change. And from that moment on, the Oilers actually were the best team in the NHL. They hired Chris Knobloch. His first game was November 14th. They beat the New York Islanders. And in 68 games since the coaching change, no team in the NHL had more points than the Edmonton Oilers, 95. They had the best record over that span, 45, 18, and 5. So maybe the loss to the Oilers this year wasn't just another loss to the Oilers. Maybe it was a loss to the best team in hockey, a team that has a chance to win the Stanley Cup. Now, there's no question. One of the big reasons the Kings lost to the Oilers was the disparity in special teams. The Oilers were 9 for 20 on the power play. The Kings were 0 for 12 with the man advantage. Well, it wasn't just the Oilers having great special teams against the Kings. The Oilers have had great special teams throughout their run to the Stanley Cup Final. In the second round against the Vancouver Canucks, who won the Pacific Division, it went 7 games. The Oilers allowed just 3 power play goals in those 7 games, and they ended up scoring 6 power play goals on 20 opportunities. Now, they weren't quite as dominant against the Canucks as they were against the Kings, but still very, very good. And in the conference finals against the Dallas Stars, the number 1 seed in the West, Edmonton was 4 for 11 on the power play while completely shutting down the Stars power play. The Dallas power play was 0 for 14 in the series. So again, maybe it wasn't just that the Kings were horrible on special teams. Maybe it was that the Oilers have been dominant on special teams. Their power play this postseason is at 37.3%. That's the best. Their penalty kill is a ridiculous 93.9% this postseason. That is ridiculous. So yes, they did dominate the Kings in the special teams category, but they pretty much did the same against the Pacific Division champs, the Canucks, and the Central Division champs, the Stars. So that said, do you feel any better about what the Oilers did to the Kings? So if the Oilers win it all, will that maybe change your mind is the question. Now, when Jim Hiller had his press conference as being introduced as the Kings' new head coach, he said the Kings were close, and then he said either really close or very close. I can't recall, but I remember thinking, close to what? What is he talking about? Well, maybe if you consider the fact that the Kings were eliminated by a Stanley Cup championship team, maybe they are close. Or am I just reaching here? I would say, look, the Oilers beat the Kings in 5 games. It wasn't a 7-game series that had a lot of multiple overtime games. It was a 5-game series. Now, 3 of them were decided by 1 goal. One of them was won by the Kings in overtime. But if you're asking yourself, and you can only answer this question, but if I'm asking myself, do I feel better that the Kings were eliminated by what could be a championship caliber team? I'm not ready to go there. Look, the Oilers went 7 against Vancouver. They went 6 against Dallas. The Stars really should have won game 6. We should be getting ready for a game 7. They dominated Edmonton, really. They outshot them like 35-10. But the Oilers got 2 power play goals, special teams, and Stuart Skinner had probably the game of his life. And so the Oilers were able to close it out to their credit in 6 games. But I think if you're the Stars, I think if you're the Canucks, you can look at those losses as saying, yeah, we were right there with what has turned out to be a pretty good team. I don't know that the Kings were right there. At least that's the way I feel about it. Now, maybe if the Oilers do end up winning it all, maybe I'll feel a little bit better. I don't even know if I could even say feel better. Maybe it'll be a little easier to swallow, although, like I said, I am not rooting for the Oilers to win. I'm rooting for the Panthers to win. But it is an interesting question, I think, that some Kings fans have been asking themselves, so I wanted to ask it as well. Do you feel any better if the Oilers win it all, or now that they've got to the final, does it feel different at all that they were able to roll over the Kings because they've had such a great season, because they've had such an amazing postseason run? For me, I will say maybe a tiny bit, but overall, it hasn't really changed my outlook on the Kings. I know what Jim Hiller said, but I know what I feel. He said they were close, very close. I say they're not. I don't feel the Kings at this point are close to advancing out of the first round. I don't feel they're a cup contender. Obviously, we'll see what the offseason brings, but it hasn't really changed my mind. I got to be honest about that. But maybe it's changed yours, and that is certainly a topic of discussion for our Friday fan feedback show. If you want to chime in on that, we'll give you the email address a little bit later on in the show. Up next, Quinton Byfield. Is he ready to take another step forward? We talk about that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Drive passion and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. During this offseason, we are looking at player profiles for key LA Kings players from this past season that should be key players again for next season. We've talked about Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, Adrian Kempe so far. We didn't officially do one on Kevin Fiala, but we talked a lot about him and how well he played at the World Championships, being named the MVP of that tournament, and what an elite offensive weapon he is, and hopefully can be utilized better in a different style, perhaps under head coach Jim Hiller. We also talked about the Kevin Fiala Brock Faber trade and how I still think that was the right move for LA. Now, if you missed any of those shows, you can go back and check them out if you'd like. Today, we're going to talk about Kings forward Quinton Byfield. At this time last season, there were some Kings fans that were concerned about Quinton Byfield. There were even those that were convinced that Q was a bust. Before last season, he had played 99 games in the NHL, and he had just 8 goals and 25 points for 8 goals and 25 assists for 33 points. He also had nagging injury issues, and there was the concern if he could stay healthy. Well, this past season, Byfield certainly answered those questions. The number 2 overall pick in 2020, considered an elite talent, played 80 games and eclipsed his NHL career totals in one season with 20 goals, 35 assists for 55 points. So now the question is, can he take another step forward this coming season? Can he be a 30-goal scorer? Can he be a 60 to 70-point producer? Can he be the Kings' leading scorer next season? Adrian Kempe led the Kings with 75 points. Trevor Moore led the team in goals with 31. I think Quinton Byfield can be that kind of player. I think he can be in consideration for the top goal scorer on the team. I think he can be in the running to be the Kings' top scorer in points. But will he? I think there are a few things that depend on that, but if he does stay healthy and he continues to take the steps forward that he took this past season, I don't see any reason why he can't be that type of a player. Now, Byfield did hit a bit of a wall over the last quarter of this past season. Started great. He had 6 goals and 10 points in December, 4 goals and 9 points in January, 4 goals and 11 points in February. But March and April combined, he really cooled off with just a total in those 2 months of 2 goals and 9 points. Now, again, maybe he just hit a bit of a wall. The most games he had played in an NHL season before last season was 53. And it was right around the 54-game mark that he kind of started this slump a little bit. So perhaps it was due to hitting that kind of a wall. Perhaps it was due to some sort of an illness or a health situation, which I do have concerns about a little bit with Quinton Byfield. Now, we had an interview early in the offseason with LA Kings longtime analyst Jim Fox, and he brought up that Q might have had some sort of an illness late in the season, and he even kind of hinted that it was something that might be, needed to get treatment for. In other words, maybe it was something that he's dealing with. It wasn't just a seasonal thing or the flu or whatever. That maybe there was something a little bit more. At least that's the feel I got from talking to Jim Fox. It was something he was maybe a little concerned about. If that is the case, certainly that's something to keep an eye on. Hopefully it can get diagnosed and treated if there is something more than just him coming down with an illness. He did have the fractured ankle back in 2021, but he is still a very young player. I think you can still say he's still growing into that big frame that he has. I mean, he's 21 years old, 6'5", 225. Obviously, he's got good size, could still bulk up a little bit more. He has grown into becoming the type of player that can absorb hits, that can shield off defenders with his size and his body, win those board battles. Before last season, he was engaging. He had the will to get into those fights along the boards, but he wasn't winning a lot of them. It seemed like he got knocked down a lot. He did much better last season in not only staying on his skates, having better balance, better strength, but winning a lot of those battles to set up his teammates for scoring opportunities. He's got a good frame, a nice wingspan that serves him well, and I should continue to be assets for him as he goes forward. There are not a lot of players with that kind of size that can have those kinds of moves and those kinds of speed and abilities. We saw it last season. He put on some moves that are a little bit more indicative of a player who's a bit smaller. Of course, who could forget one of the highlights of the year for the LA Kings, probably the highlight of the year, and I think, frankly, was in the running for top goal of the year, and that was the game on February the 20th against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Scoreless game. Kings win a faceoff in their own zone. It goes to Byfield, and he shoots down the ice, takes on two defenders, one of them being Columbus Blue Jackets all-star Zach Werenski, did a pull and drag move through Werenski, then kicked the puck to his skate, and then put on a backhand shot over the goalie's pad. And that was just a glimpse, I think, of what Quinton Byfield's ceiling could be. Now, sure, he has to put it together for a full season, not just 75% of a season. And yeah, he's got to stay healthy, but I think we should expect in the near future, maybe as soon as next season, Quinton Byfield not just becoming a very good player, but maybe even an elite player, maybe even the best player on the LA Kings. And I think he should expect that from himself as well. I think he proved a lot to himself last season and certainly proved a lot to his teammates. Him being the leading scorer on the team, I don't think is asking too much. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's something that certainly could happen. I mean, look, this past season, while playing, like I said, a really strong, probably 75% of a season, he was fifth on the team in points. He was fifth on the team in goals. So it's not like if he takes another step forward that he wouldn't be right there with the Trevor Moores and the Kevin Fialas and the Adrian Kempes and the Anze Kopitars. Now, where his career will end up as far as where he's going to play is still a question. I've said all along, I think the Kings feel like eventually he's the heir apparent to Anze Kopitar as their top line center. I think that's the plan. Plans don't always go as you expect them to go. And I think for now, barring some sort of an unforeseen injury, I think Quinton Byfield is going to be a winger on the top line this coming season. And I think he certainly has grown into that role. And eventually he's going to be asked to grow into the role of being a top six center. I don't think that's this coming year, like I said, barring anything unforeseen. But, with Anze Kopitar starting his final 2 years of his contract this coming year, once that is up, we can certainly have that discussion then. But I think for next season, I'm expecting Quinton Byfield to continue to get better. I think he can put up even better numbers than he did this past season. And I don't think, again, it is too much to ask and expect Quinton Byfield to be, if he's not already, one of the top players on the LA Kings and even growing into being a leader on the LA Kings, somebody who could see a letter on his sweater in the not too distant future. I think that is certainly all things that are something that we can look forward to and expect with Quinton Byfield. I'm really looking forward to seeing him take another step forward this coming season. Up next, we'll talk about another potential Kings star in the making with defenseman Brant Clark. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. It is championship time in the NBA and the NHL. We know all the teams that are now in the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Final. Baseball is still in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. All an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. Unfortunately, we don't have any of our local teams still alive in the postseason, but the teams that beat our teams, like the Oilers and the Mavericks, are in the finals. We could still root against those teams. I know I'm rooting against the Oilers. And Dodger fans, you guys are in first place, one of the favorites to win it all. It is a great time of the year to be a sports fan, and it can be even better by winning with FanDuel. You can bet on who will win, who will lose, and things like how many home runs Shohei Ohtani is going to hit this season. You can do it all with FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. From one Kings emerging star to a potential future star, we talk about Quinton Byfield, and it looks like next season will be Brant Clark's turn to show what he can do as a full-time NHL player. Expectations are obviously high for the recently turned 21-year-old, former 8th overall pick in 2021, played his first full pro season last year with the Ontario Reign, 50 games in the AHL. He had 10 goals with 36 assists for 46 points. He also had 16 games with the LA Kings, where he scored 2 goals and had 6 points in 16 games. I know the Kings and GM Rob Blake have said they would like to re-sign defenseman Matt Roy. I'm pretty convinced that's not going to happen. Roy deserves to get paid. He's earned that right. I think he's going to go out and try and make as much money as he can, which he absolutely should. And I don't think the Kings are in the best position to give him the best deal. And I think he's going to take the best deal. Now, if that does in fact happen, the silver lining to Matt Roy's departure is that it now gives us a chance to see Brant Clark full-time with the LA Kings. He should be on the right side. Maybe he fills in directly into the skates of Matt Roy on that second pairing. Or maybe it's Jordan Spence on the second pairing and Matt Roy getting his feet wet in the NHLs on the third pairing. That certainly remains to be seen. But I think the Kings are, if they have to, ready to transition into Brant Clark. I think Clark will certainly push, if that does happen, I think he'll push Jordan Spence to run the Kings' second power play unit. That would be a fun competition to see. Maybe those two guys can push each other to make that second power play unit even better. Now, reports on Clark in the AHL this season were that he did improve his defensive side of the game, which is what he was asked to do. And while he still needs to prove he can defend at the NHL level, I have confidence that he can at least hold his own. Now, 25 career NHL games, he is a -7. He was a -3 in the AHL last season as well. But what makes Brant Clark special is his offensive upside. Now, had he played a full AHL season, he would have easily been in contention for the top scoring defenseman in the league. Now, I mentioned he had 46 points in 50 games with the Reign. The top scoring defenseman in the AHL, Kyle Capobianco, had just 8 more points, and he played 19 more games than Brant Clark. Capobianco's in his 5th pro season. Clark was in his 1st. So, like I said, if Brant Clark had played a full season in the AHL, very likely as a rookie, he would have led all AHL defensemen in points. Now, Drew Doughty led the Kings this past season in points for a defenseman with 50. That was in 82 games. The next closest defenseman for the Kings was Matt Roy with 25 points, so 25 fewer points than Drew Doughty. Obviously, scoring from the blue line is something the Kings definitely need to improve on. And while Clark potentially could step in for Matt Roy, and the Kings defense, if that is the case, would likely take a step back because of that, you would think the offense, though, would take at least a half step forward. So there would be, something that would be lost, but there's something that would be gained as well because Brant Clark is a different type of player than Matt Roy. Now, LA last season, 17th in the league in points from their defensive core, 157. By comparison, Colorado led the NHL with 243 points from their blue liners. And just like Quinton Byfield, who had his highlight reel goal against Columbus, Clark also had his big welcome to the NHL moment last season, scoring that breakaway goal in overtime against the Boston Bruins on the road for his first NHL goal. What a spectacular moment for him. Certainly a moment that proved to him that he can perform on the big stage under the brightest lights and in a big moment. And just a little glimpse of his abilities and what he can do. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. I think he still certainly has some growing to do into getting that NHL frame, but he's got a good frame to work on. And I'm sure that will be something that is going to be a focus going forward in his development to get him bigger and stronger and be able to take the pounding of a full NHL season. If in fact that happens, which I anticipate it's going to. Again, there's going to be growing pains for Brant Clark. I don't think we should, as Kings fans, expect he's just going to step in and be a dominant NHL defenseman. It'll take some time, like it did with Quinton Byfield, but in the next couple of years, I'm pretty excited and confident that Brant Clark can be a real asset for the LA Kings back on that blue line. As I mentioned with Quinton Byfield, the thought is he takes over for Andrei Kopitar at some point. I think the same goes for Brant Clark. I think down the road, the Kings are looking at kind of a passing of the torch between Drew Doughty and Brant Clark. So we'll see. But again, I think it'll be very exciting next season for Kings fans to see Brant Clark as a full-time NHLer. I did want to mention real quick, I saw the LA Kings posted on their X account some really awful news. Braden Hink, he dropped the puck before the Kings Hockey Fights cancer game this past season. He passed away. He was 11. It's an absolute gut punch to see that news. I can't even imagine what his family is going through. Hopefully all the posts and the well wishes to that post by the Kings from Kings fans and others. I saw there was Oiler fans on there posting their condolences as well. Hopefully that can provide a little comfort to the Hink family. But I wanted to mention that, and my condolences as well to the family of Braden Hink. That's just beyond horrible news. And I know that there's a link on there for the Hink family's Caring Bridge account. You can read about Braden's life, and if you'd like, you can make a donation to his foundation. It helps assist families who have children that are going through cancer treatments, which is obviously a very worthy cause to donate to. So if you'd like to do that, you could check out the repost that I had if you follow us on social media, or go to the LA Kings X account, and you'll see that there, and you click on the link. And if you want to donate, that would be awesome. And while we're talking about it, I am wearing a hat that some of you might know. And if you know, you know. But I did want to give a shout out to a Kings fan and a fan of this show as well, Tim in Michigan. I got to meet him at a Kings game this year in February. He is going through his battle with cancer. It's a tough battle. He's doing the best he can. It was great to meet him, and I've been communicating with him on social media. And I just wanted to, if he's watching this, Tim, want to wish you all the best. And I know you're doing everything you can to keep that fight going, but just want to wish you all the best as well. All right, that is going to do it for today's show. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up this week on Tuesday, we're going to talk about Kings prospects. The Memorial Cup got wrapped up this weekend, so all of the seasons are over except for the Stanley Cup Final and, of course, the AHL. But all of the minor leagues, if you will, the prospect leagues, all those seasons are in the books, I believe. So we're going to check in on how the season concluded, the season stats for some of the Kings' big prospects and recent draft picks. Coming up on Wednesday, Caro Balikian from the Bannerman podcast is going to join us. That's the first time we've had a chance to talk to anybody over on that Kings podcast, so that'll be fun. Thursday, we're going to keep going with our Kings player profiles, take a look at Kings forward Trevor Moore. And of course, as always, we'll update you on any Kings news that develops throughout the week. As for Friday's show, another Kings fan feedback show, like I said, one of those topics that you might want to chime in on if you feel strongly about it. Do you feel differently about the Kings and the way the season ended now that the Edmonton Oilers are into the Stanley Cup Final? You want to get in on that? You want to send an email for that? The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. We always love your comments in the YouTube episodes as well. If you're watching, helps the algorithm, helps the show to be found on YouTube. And we'd love you to stay interactive with us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.